I am so very happy and excited to have here Mr. Scott Tarde. He is a licensed nursing home administrator and the CEO of the George D. Glenner's Alzheimer's Family Centers in Chula Vista, California. I saw this center, his center, well, it's a town square center. It's a state-of-the-art adult daycare in California. And I went to see it right before they were opening. And I can tell you that the concept that he has and he's brought to this new center that looks like little villages within the warehouse where they located is just, for me, as the owner of 2 adult daycare centers, it was amazing. I was speechless. I felt like when I went back to when I was 7 years old, when I went to Disneyland for the first time in my life. And I was heading towards the town square, and I just felt like, oh my goodness, this is gonna be amazing. But when I walked in there, I felt like, where is Mickey Mouse? He's gonna be out here any minute. I just was so excited, and I am returning soon because I wanna see it in full blast, active, working. I wanna see their members or participants there and how is it all blending in. But I can't wait. Please welcome Mr. Scott Tarde.
Okay. I don't want to be stuck right here. So, Maria, thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And I think the first thing I want to say is that I'm absolutely honored to be here. And I want to thank each and every one of you for the incredible work that you do as family caregivers. One of the most important parts of my day is asking my family members that we serve how they are. And invariably, they start answering the question about their loved one instead of about themselves. And so I want you to know that for those of us that have spent a majority of our careers serving others facing Alzheimer's disease, there are people that care about you as family caregivers. And this is not necessarily something that you signed up to do, but you are incredible in what you do and the commitment that you have to your loved ones. And I've seen a lot in my career, and one of the things that I think is just most important is that you hear that you're valued and that people are out there working to try to make resources available to you. And this is a wonderful, wonderful example of that. So thank you for allowing me to be here today and to share with you what we're working on in San Diego. So a couple of things I think you'd find interesting. I actually grew up in South Florida. For many years I lived in, maybe people are familiar with Coral Springs, Boca Raton area. I actually went to Stoneman Douglas High School, but I graduated from a high school in Arizona. I left the middle of my junior year, so it's been very impactful to see what's been happening in the communities, and just one more thing in our society that we're working on. So with that, I've been in San Diego for many years, and started my career actually as a caregiver in an Alzheimer's facility when I was about 19. Started as a caregiver and worked my way through and passed medications, not as a nurse, but as a med tech, and onto social work, and was a nursing home administrator for many years, and then into running assisted living communities throughout California, Arizona, and New Mexico. So I've been around, and but I've been dedicated my entire career to helping those facing Alzheimer's disease. So what I'm about to share with you today is kind of a journey of what our organization is about, and then of course what Town Square is about. So, and I'll save some time for questions at the end, so hopefully you'll have a good understanding of what we do. So let's start the journey here. First thing I like to mention is we have a very unique model in the Glenner Centers in that we were founded in 1982. When we're celebrating, so my slides are a little bit out of date as far as the number, but we're actually coming up on 37 years now. And our founders, of course, Dr. George Glenner, may he rest in peace, he was a world-renowned research pathologist, and so one of the passions that I have among many in serving the aging population is to make sure that they know who Dr. Glenner was in relation to the world of Alzheimer's disease, and his wife, Joy Glenner, who still is very much involved in the organization, approaching 90 years old. Dr. Glenner was a world-renowned research pathologist. He actually discovered the beta amyloid protein, helped isolate it with one of his colleagues at the University of California, San Diego. So we have a very unparalleled history as an organization because Dr. Glenner was so focused on his research. He actually was recruited from the National Institutes of Health in DC to come out and open his lab at UCSD and actually open the first brain bank at UCSD in the late 70s, early 80s. But Dr. Glenner started to have a very strong reputation throughout San Diego as really a resource for families that were facing dementia, really not understanding what they were facing. And one late evening, he actually received a call from a distraught family caregiver, a husband, who was looking to take his wife's life and then his own. So their story is one that always gives me goosebumps because Dr. Glenner was so incredibly compassionate, as well as Joy, that they tried to figure out, obviously, resources immediately for this individual. Got the call traced, back in the day when they had to get calls traced quickly, and worked with the sheriff to keep the person on the line, the family caregiver on the line. And they got him the help that he needed that evening, and they stopped that terrible tragedy from happening. And the story goes that Dr. Glenner turned to Joy and said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And of course, she just, we just stopped this terrible tragedy from happening. What do you mean, what are we doing tomorrow? And he said, "It's time to start taking care of the living." And so even though his research continued, and obviously he continued to work on, I think, what Dr. Glenner would have characterized as more as the answer. He never said the word cure. He was more about the answer. I know that we have researchers throughout the world looking for a cure and fighting very hard to figure options out. He was really more about the etiology of the disease and how to maybe potentially prevent Alzheimer's in the first place from happening, and that's where his focus on beta amyloid was. So with that, they started the first nonprofit dementia-specific Alzheimer's Day program in the nation. In fact, a little known story is that when they went to the Department of Social Services for California, there was no such application for adult daycare. They actually crossed out child care and put adult daycare on the application. So kind of an interesting kind of evolution in daycare for adults. And again, as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit 501c3, so our model's a little different than you might see for some for-profit organizations. So I share some of that throughout, but just understand that we have some different funding sources and things like that. So as I share that, I'll highlight those things. I always like to give credit to my board of directors, who's incredible. I have a great board of directors. I have a wonderful advisory council as well. All kinds of kind of giants in the field and certainly throughout the San Diego community as well. So headed up by Dr. Daniel Sewell, who is at University of California, San Diego, and opened one of the first geropsychiatric units at the Hillcrest Center, UCSD, which was really a model for those throughout the nation. So very proud to have this advisory council. I know that probably this went over a lot today, but I always like to highlight it just from the standpoint of touching on kind of national, and it kind of sets the context for where I'm going in my presentation. But every time I do this presentation, I always note that these numbers change all the time. Most of my statistics now, or sources, and a lot of professionals and colleagues in this room might feel the same. It's I hear 5.4 to 6 million on a normal basis of individuals facing Alzheimer's disease. And I put some San Diego County specific numbers, just I thought you might find that interesting. San Diego County has about 3 million people in it. And of those 3 million, we've got 84,000 people diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And it is essentially the #3 cause of death in San Diego County. and always there's usually correlations in different things related to aging in the population, but I know that everybody knows that one of the greatest predictors of Alzheimer's disease, of course, is age. So most statistics now show that over 85 is 1 in 3. So, and others vary from different sources, but point is a clear point and a very powerful point is that the numbers, we're kind of at the early side of these numbers. In fact, 16 million is typically the number I hear now of individuals projected to have Alzheimer's by 2025. So we're right around the corner from that number. And what's interesting to me is I went and presented Town Square, which will be the second half of my presentation today, in Kyoto, Japan, at the Alzheimer's Disease International Conference last year. And there was a United States researcher that actually predicted that there would be 170 million people worldwide with dementia by 2050. So you can pretty much hear a pin drop in that room that day, because I just don't think that people fully realize how incredibly overwhelming these numbers are, and I think even more importantly than that is how underprepared we are as a society for what's about to happen. So obviously everybody in this room is understanding, all the professionals in this room are understanding, but it's difficult to engage in the dialogue because a lot of people just don't really appreciate what dementia is. They don't really understand specifically what Alzheimer's is, and then you've got all the other types of dementias that come along with that, right? So you've got your vascular dementias, your Lewy body dementia, your Parkinson's dementia. Now we're talking, and we're seeing in our center CTE, which is of course the concussion-based type of dementia. So there are so many different types of dementia that are not even included in these statistics. So, you know, I think the bottom line is it's not an epidemic, it's a pandemic, and we'd be best to start figuring out options that are affordable and accessible to family caregivers, because that's the numbers right now are showing. Now this says 600 billion. I've already heard close to $1 trillion worldwide on dementia care. These numbers, I always say when I show these, a lot of people, there's usually kind of comments in the audience because those are the low side of those numbers, right? So I know even when my assisted living communities that were memory specific, it was typically $7,000 to $10,000 a month. And I just don't know a lot of people that have $120,000 a year every year to pay for care, especially for a disease that lasts typically 6 to 10 years. So, you know, this is a real, obviously, understated issue. Home care, of course, at least in California, is $20 to $27 an hour. Again, not very affordable for a lot of individuals. And then long-term care insurance, of course, it's probably, what, 1 to 3% of the population that has a long-term care insurance policy. And then we're talking about usually like a $100 a day benefit, which maybe touches 50% of the cost. So, again, this is an issue that not only needs to be highlighted, but we really have to start having resources and options for people. So let me just tell you a little bit about our program, just so that you have a better understanding. You know that we're a nonprofit. We've been in operation for going on 37 years. We actually provide adult day programming in 3 locations. So we have, in just kind of for reference, the north part of the county, the central part of the county, and the south part of the county. So we serve we call our individuals that attend participants. The participants come Monday through Friday. We're open 8:45 to 5:15. So just to be clear, we're 100% a respite model. So individuals come and drop their loved ones off. Some come every day, some come 3 times a week. The average is about 2 to 2.5 times a week, something in that range. And we try to really create an environment, of course, that lends itself to family caregivers feeling that they can do the things that they need to do. The average age of our participants and typically in their early 80s. So clearly their spouses are typically in that same age range, or we're talking about adult children. Typically the adult children are in that 40 to 60-year-old range. Typically, actually 45 to 64-year-old adult females are typically our customer because they are the ones that are looking for not only care for their loved ones, but also for their in-laws. So this is not uncommon to see that as kind of the major demographic that's looking for care. We actually have a registered nurse on staff every day. That is not a regulatory requirement, although we are regulated by the California Department of Public Health. We're an adult day health care center, so we're actually a medical model. A licensed nurse is required on staff every day, but we actually have a registered nurse on staff every day. That was always a Glenner standard. Dr. Glenner and Joy felt very strongly that having a registered nurse on staff was very important, specifically because they could communicate the things that the family caregivers were seeing to the physicians. And so that was an important kind of misstep they felt in a lot of programs, because there was difficulty for family caregivers to really explain what was going on, because it was the first time they were ever seeing it. So with a registered nurse by their side to really kind of interpret that, bring it back to the doctor and understand what some of the interventions can be. So whether it's something as direct as a UTI, or we're dealing more with behavioral manifestations of the disease. We have a 5-to-1 direct care staff ratio, which has always been a Glenner gold standard. So I'm always very proud to share that, because you usually won't find that ratio, certainly in assisted livings and nursing homes. So we are very proud to have a 5-to-1 direct care staff ratio. We also provide caregiver support groups free of charge. Individuals can bring their loved ones, not even necessarily enrolled, and receive free respite care while they're coming to the support group. We have those in each one of our locations, and those are professionally facilitated by our team. And then we have a professional education program as well. We actually have a volunteer program that's funded by the the County of San Diego. We have memory cafes, which some of you might be familiar, are kind of like, we describe them as kind of like meetups, where people that are potentially concerned about memory issues, maybe prior to ever being diagnosed or anything like that, but they want to understand what their resources are available. There's a term out there now called elder orphans, which you might be familiar with, which essentially is the adult child, or an individual who has no children. And so they have characterized themselves as elder orphans. And so when they don't have any children to take care of them, perhaps, they want to be able to figure out what their resources are and be in control of those decisions. So we help to kind of start those dialogues. And then Town Square, of course, which I'm going to talk all about. So why adult daycare? And again, I know there's wonderful adult day options here in this area, and so I just wanted to share what kind of our take on that is. I mean, we certainly feel that it allows the individual to continue to live in their home, which as a nursing home administrator and an assisted living guy, I can tell you that I know for a fact that nobody wants to be in a nursing home or an assisted living. It's just a fact. It's not any kind of knock on, there are quality rehabilitation and nursing facilities out there, there are quality assisted livings, but I would argue, and if my colleagues were honest, they would say that nobody wants to be in a nursing home or an assisted living. And that's just because people want to stay at home as long as possible. So, and it allows family caregivers to receive that much needed break, which, as I started my presentation with, is very, very, very important. The toll that 24-hour families, caregivers, that it takes on them being a family caregiver is brutal. And I think without having that respite opportunity to take time for yourself, the physical and the mental impact is strong. And what we try to do here is make sure that families understand that so that they can get engaged and involved early with the program. We know that it reduces incidences of dangerous falls and wandering, reduces incidences of hospitalization. I think most importantly for our participants is the socialization and the stimulation, right? So you might be doing a wonderful job at home, but it's just you. Having that socialization and that stimulation is really important from a psychosocial well-being. Obviously, cognition is decreased, but that doesn't mean that the individual still doesn't value having those outside interactions with people that are beyond just their loved ones. We have an RN to manage medications, and we can actually do diabetic injections as well, sliding scales, things like that. So that's a benefit of a medical model in that regard. And then, of course, our rates, and I always like to mention this again, because I don't know that you can necessarily compare our rates to all private models out there, but we charge $95 a day, which is less than $12 an hour. We have not raised our rates in almost 5 fiscal years because we have donors and grantors that help us to subsidize those operational costs. So we're very proud of that. Scott's dream is to lower that rate. So I'd like to give it away if I could. And I think it's just that important for family caregivers to have that option, and I don't want anybody to ever feel that they can't afford it. We do have some scholarship programs, financial aid programs available as well, so we're proud of that as well. And it's cut off a little bit, I apologize, but we do take long-term care insurance, of course, for those that have that. We do have a contract with the VA, so we serve our veterans very proudly in San Diego, and then we also work very closely with PACE programs. So you might be familiar with PACE programs. These are individuals that might otherwise be in a nursing home, but they work specifically through, it's a dual eligible, meaning a Medicare, Medicaid program. We call it Medi-Cal. We're special in California. We have our own program. But Medicaid, and this is a way that typically nonprofit organizations, but sometimes private care organizations, there's about 400 PACE programs. Are you guys familiar with PACE programs? Okay. So PACE programs are gaining a lot of momentum, and we contract directly with the PACE programs and are able to receive our actual rate. We don't necessarily, we can take individuals through Medicaid, but it's grossly underfunded, so we have to end up subsidizing a majority of that. So we'd prefer to go that route if at all possible. I'm going to stop just for a second. Does anybody have any quick questions about just our program before? And you're welcome to hold them until the end, but I just wanted, sometimes it's important to just have that paused just for a second, because I'm going to go all into Town Square, and I just want to make sure that there isn't any questions about our model. Okay. Yes? Okay, sure. He's gonna bring you a mic.
Is there anything that would exclude someone for being able to receive services at your facility?
It's a great question. So the answer is yes, but typically we try to take it on a case-by-case basis, of course. We do deal with, I would say, more mid to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Once we're talking about mobility being significantly impacted, although we do take wheelchairs and walkers and things like that, of course, but once mobility is significantly impacted, especially when somebody needs like a two-person transfer, then we start to have some restrictions there. And then, of course, some more specific medical situations, like, obviously we're not taking trachs and tubes and things like that, but, and then we can deal with a fair amount of incontinence. Typically, once we get to bowel incontinence, it gets a little bit more difficult, but we do a fair amount of urinary incontinence. But we try to extend that runway as long as possible for our loved ones. But great question. All right, I'm going to pop into Town Square, and then I'll have time at the end for all kinds of questions. So I'm wondering, has anybody heard of Town Square before today? Okay, all right, good. So let me talk to you a little bit about Town Square and just kind of the model itself. So first off, what's important to note about Town Square specifically is that it's an environment, and it's an immersive reminiscence therapy environment. And so it was actually inspired by, so my daughter's 14, she'll be 14 in a couple weeks, and she was 10 at the time when she went to a place called BizTown. And I don't know if you're familiar with BizTown, but it's put on by a company called Junior Achievement, and they have BizTowns throughout the United States. And essentially what it is it's a curriculum program where fifth graders go, and they do a lot of off-site kind of interviewing for jobs and studying about kind of commerce and learning how to balance a checkbook. Very practical kind of skills, right, that are out there.
We have that in L.N.H.A, but it's got a different name.
Okay. Fantastic. So it's definitely out there. And one of the things that my daughter said when she came home was, she was just raving about it, and she said, "Dad, you got to see this." And so I went and saw. And I think what struck me is I really felt like I saw individuals, fifth graders, being engaged in a very specific way. They were engaging with spaces. And so what struck me is that throughout life, we are engaging in spaces. This is a space. I came from a space in a hotel. I came from a space in an airport. These are all things that speak to people through kind of what I would call the filter of their life. And so all of us have different filters and different experiences, but we share a lot of commonalities in places that we've been to. And so I started to do kind of, some brainstorming, and I said, what if we could create an environment for our individuals that we serve that actually was reminiscent of the time period in their life that was kind of the strongest. And of course, for our participants, they're in their early 80s, as I mentioned before. And so we determined that we could create in about 10,000 square feet, 14 fully interactive storefronts that would be part of the programming. I'm going to share more about that. And we designed that in partnership with the San Diego Opera. The San Diego Opera has something called the Scenic Studio, and they don't just build opera sets, but they build sets for like Comic-Con, they do things for movies, they do things for commercials. And so we wanted to have that level of authenticity because by no means did I want it to be juvenile whatsoever. I wanted it to be as 100% authentic as possible for individuals engaging in the spaces. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these things here at the bottom here, but I want to talk about reminiscence therapy specifically. So reminiscence therapy is based on a principle, and I'm going to show a video in just a few minutes, and you're going to hear me say this again, but I want to stress it right here because this is very, very important. We don't try to fool anybody that it's 1953, and you're going to hear that in the video again. But we are trying to create an environment that's consistent with where people's strongest memories are that we serve. Research shows, and this is not Glenner research, this is independent research, shows that people make their strongest memories between the ages of 10 and 30. So I usually take a pause there because if I have people under 30 in the room, I say, you still have time. But if you're over 30, it doesn't mean you stop learning or anything like that, but it does mean that we've made typically our strongest memories by the age of 30. The reason that is, research shows, is because that's typically life's first events happen during those times. So graduating high school, graduating college, I typically say first marriage, children, things like that, right? So these are very impactful for people in their minds, and it's more hardwired. There's a wonderful, wonderful research that's been done by an individual by the name of Dr. L.N.H.A. She's out of Harvard. She wrote a book called Counterclockwise. And one of the things that she really talks about is how physical spaces and kind of the power of the mind engaging in those spaces actually has physiological impact on people. And we've seen that. We've seen that through things like music. I know everyone in this room has experience with music related to dementia. It's very powerful because research has shown that music and the way that it's mapped in the brain is almost untouched by Alzheimer's disease, which is great news if in an otherwise brutal situation that there is something that you can kind of latch on. It doesn't mean that it works every single time, but it does have powerful impact. So reminiscence therapy is really shown to reduce agitation, improve mood, and improve sleep quality. All of things which are really important to everybody in this room that's a family caregiver, right? Because if nothing else, if your loved one sleeps better at night because of coming to this environment, then it's a win for both of us, right? Because you get the respite, they sleep better at night, and you sleep better at night, which means you're happier caregivers. So this is the kind of the philosophy. So I always like to stress this because people say, well, Scott, reminiscence therapy, what does that mean? Does that mean my loved one's going to get better? No, it doesn't necessarily mean anything about getting better or curing. It just means that this is an approach like music therapy, like art therapy, like pet therapy that will provide some comfort and potentially have these physiological impacts on individuals and psychological impacts. So again, I wanted to make sure that I stress that research part of it because I think it's very important. So I want to show you, these are some wonderful partners that we have, which I'll kind of stress. We have some wonderful supporters. These are the storefronts that are in town square. So you have everything from a library to a pet shop. And again, these are three-dimensional spaces, range from about 400 square feet all the way up to about 1,100 square feet. The space itself is nearly 10,000 square feet. So this is a large environment designed to be as authentic as possible. So you see the rest of the storefronts, the clinic, the diner, City Hall. We have a replica of our original Glenner Center called the Little Blue House, a garage, a sports pub, etc. So these are the storefronts that are there. This is the actual blueprint or floor plan of Town Square. And it's hard to see up there, guys, but you can kind of see the depth, if you will, of each storefront. And you'll see a little bit more about this in a second. So this was the original concept art that was done. We have a wonderful concept architect. He has a great architect name. His name is Doug Pancake. So he did incredible work when we first started concepting. And I called Doug, and Doug, he went to University of Arizona. His background is all in senior living design. And I said, Doug, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And he's like, man, I think we can do it. And I said, and so we started to talk through. And he didn't end up being the architect of record, but he ended up being, very instrumental in the concept art. So this is one of the first storefronts that was created, and we actually did this in September of 2016, so you can see the set builders from the opera, so you can start to appreciate the authentic value. This is 16 feet tall, so pictures don't always do it justice, but this is about as authentic as it can be from a space that someone would engage with. And all the programming, and I'm going to talk about a lot more as we go through here, happens within these storefronts. This is a sketch of the garage. And this, of course, is a 1959 Ford Thunderbird that now lives inside of Town Square. Anybody have a 1959 Ford Thunderbird? Oh, okay. There's your car. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play my video, and then it's going to be about 2.5, 3 minutes, and then we're going to keep going through, okay?
First look at something new in the fight against Alzheimer's. And anyone who has a family member dealing with this disease knows it can be a struggle, a full-time one. And this idea could revolutionize the care you're getting and giving. It looks like a movie set from the 1950s. But this is actually a daycare facility for seniors with dementia. Is this revolutionary?
I like to think it is. Well, right over here is the pet shop.
Scott Tarde is CEO of Glenner Alzheimer's Family Centers, which runs dementia daycares in the San Diego area. Now inside this local warehouse, they've built the country's first dementia town square, a potential game changer in this $277 billion industry. Everything in here is designed to trigger the brain.
It's very intentional.
In this simulated 1950s town, which opens later this month, trained aides will guide small groups of dementia patients through 14 activity centers set up as storefronts.
People make their strongest memories between really about the ages of 10 to 30. And if you can take people back to be surrounded by prompts from their past, that shown to reduce agitation, improve mood, and improve sleep quality.
There's a full-service diner and a movie theater playing classic films, all designed to replace the monotony of regular daycare and ignite patients' brains with memories of their youth. It's called reminiscence therapy. But you're not trying to fool them into thinking it's 1960.
That's correct. These are things that promote socialization, promote activities, promote really engagement.
Let's go over here and look at this car.
We were there when dementia patients Alberta Reed and Tola Romero got their first guided tour of the square.
Which one do you like?
Accompanied by family members, they lit up at the sights.
Do the twist, Mom.
You know this one?
And danced to their favorite sounds.
Like the jukebox, huh? Brought back memories, right?
Their families say this was a blessing.
Big thing is they're like, I'm lonely, at home. She don't really talk with us much during the day. But being out and about with other people, she communicates more.
You got it.
This is not the first innovative care facility for dementia. In 2009, this dementia-friendly village was created in the Netherlands, where patients actually live.
It's not a museum. So
Tarde says for now he's focused on daycare, hoping to spread his town square concept to 200 locations nationwide. The cost to families? $95 a visit for 8 hours of specialized care, filled with music, laughter, and long walks down memory lane.
in the 50s, that's when she was raising her family and she was having a good time. And I think hopefully that's going to take her back there and she'll be happier.
I think what's interesting in this whole space, there's a lot of creativity going on and trying to figure out ways to activate the brain, music, you know, going back to a place like this, showing movies, looking at newsstands with the hope that that will bring the person somewhat back to you.
Well, I was just thinking, it's you know, it's such a caring thing to do. It's not about finding a cure. It's just a way to help people feel happier in their present.
Well, also because caring is such a full-time job and it's so draining also on the caregiver. And he was saying to me that most of the clients or the people that are making these decisions are women who are working, who are also parenting full-time, partnering. So they're, you know, the client as well.
And talk about seeing the results right there. Like you saw it on their face. Like all of a sudden they feel like they were at rest.
Right, exactly. Or they feel like they remember and then they feel like they're themselves, right? So it's the idea is to try to franchise them. So we'll see if that works.
Great idea.
So that was in, and thank you very much, and that was in, Maria came to see us in April, and we opened actually in August. So we've actually been in operation just over 6 months now in this location. Again, as you know, we have locations that we've been providing day programming for over 3 decades, but in this particular location, we're over 6 months. The maximum capacity of Town Square is 75 participants per day, although the space itself from a fire marshal's capacity is 243. So I always like to say Town Square has a lot of elbow room, and that's on purpose, that's on design to make sure that we have lots of space. The way that the program works, and this is an important part, and I'm going to take you through here just to kind of see. This Town Square as it stands today. That's the little blue house. Inside of the little blue house. It's the diner, and I always like to mention that we partner with another nonprofit organization, the Volunteers of America. They actually bring our food in each and every day. We have no need for a commercial kitchen, and that's the way that we can keep our costs down, is by having that partnership. And so food comes hot, prepared, signed off by our registered dietitian, and then on recyclable items so that we don't have any need for that commercial space. So the way that the program works, of course, is that participants are grouped in groups of typically 5. And they sometimes we have smaller groups, sometimes we have larger groups, depending on the programming of the day. And I got to give big kudos to my team. We actually have a activity program that we've named Bygone Days Productions. And of course, the environment that Bygone Days Productions happens is Town Square. It's inside of Town Square. So the way, again, the programming works is participants are grouped typically in groups of 5, and they rotate through the storefronts, very much like you or I rotated classes in high school or college, spend about 45 to 50 minutes in each storefront. There's a very common question. People will say, Scott, well, you know, people to kind of just roam around. They do not. If somebody wants to roam or move freely through the space, that's okay. It's 100% safe to do so, but ideally we have participants grouped in these groups, and then they work with their program aide through the day. And that's how we structure the programming. Because there's 14 different programmatic areas, they probably will only see 5 to 6 storefronts in a day. And we can cater that programming, and we're evolving our programming so that there's actually tracks. We can even do tracks based on functionality, based on likes and dislikes, things like that. So if somebody doesn't want to hit one storefront in a day, then we can customize that. And of course, this is Peggy. She's one of our art teachers, and you can see kind of the fine motor skills that are still being used in painting. And then, of course, we have other individuals who don't have those necessarily that skill set. But Town Square is all about functioning and actually capturing what individuals can do. Not about what they can't do, but what they can do. And I also like to say at this point all the time that Town Square is a place of purpose. So Susie, you can see in this picture here, she was actually featured in an article that was in, did anybody read the ARP Bulletin article? So there was an article in the ARP Bulletin last month. And so Susie was highlighted in that article because Susie was an accountant through her life. And so the story that I always like to tell, and Susie's family is very supportive of us sharing this, because Susie's family was in a very difficult space. She's a younger individual, and she really was struggling at home, and the family did not, and they were adamant about not placing her in a memory care facility or community. And so when they came to us, they were skeptical about whether or not she would actually engage. And we like that. We like when people are skeptical, because we want that challenge, because that's what we do. I mean, we want to be that resource to the family. So we typically say, we have your phone number and we will call you. Because it's hard. It's hard to say goodbye for that time, right? It's very much like children in school. I don't love that analogy, but it's very hard to say goodbye, because, well, I'm just going to be right here. I'm just going to go to the Starbucks. I'll be right here. It's okay. That's okay. Go do your thing, and we'll do our thing, and that's okay. And that gives people comfort that they can actually go and live their lives, because they feel, and you guys, I'm sure, feel oftentimes that your life is now their life. And so, but we have to give permission oftentimes for individuals to feel that it's okay to go and do the things that they want to do. And we'll do and have purpose for the individual during the day. So with Susie, one of my colleagues, he noticed right away that she was very agitated the first few days, and she actually had her own cell phone with her son's phone number. I am not kidding. She probably called him 200 times. Phone. I mean, it was, and he was prepared, so he knew not to answer, just because of the fact that we were working through things. And it took a little bit for her to kind of break through that first day. The second day, I will tell you that my colleague went to her and said, Susie, I understand you're an accountant, and I have several invoices that need to be coded and whatnot. And she's like, well, let me take a look at them. She was real reluctant. She's like, let me take a look at them. And don't you know, about an hour later, he came back, and she had everything itemized. Every one of those invoices. These were mock invoices, but everything was itemized, right? And she said, look, I'm happy to help you here, but I don't work with invoices that are not dated properly. Yeah. And again, this is just about going back, right? We're just going back to where her memories are. And I know this can be sensitive to some people, because they're like, well, Scott, I don't know, it seems deceptive. Well, okay, so here's the alternative. The alternative is the 200 phone calls a day, the agitation, the anxiety, the stress. So we like to look at it, I think gone are the days of reality orientation and things like that. We're talking about meeting somebody where their memories are their strongest. I know Dr. Sewell, as I mentioned on our advisory council, he loves to say that, we're meeting them. We're meeting them in their reality. And so we've created an environment that's much more consistent with their reality. Have you guys heard about why typically individuals with Alzheimer's disease recognize their children as their parents? You know why that is, right? So most theories say that when somebody recognizes their children as their parents, it's because not so much that they necessarily think that they are their parents, but the facial recognition takes them back to their parents. So they're seeing the resemblance in their children, but their memory takes them back to their parents. So it starts to make a lot of sense when you start to think about reminiscence therapy and why it's so powerful, and why these reactions happen. So Bertie, when you saw her dancing at the jukebox, these are reactions that would be consistent with where her strong memories are. So going back to Susie, to wrap that story up, the third day she was with us, her family reported that she knocked on the door like 6 o'clock in the morning. They were all concerned, thought something was terribly wrong. She was fully dressed. She had a dress on. She had her hair done. And she said, I got to get going because I'm going to be late for work. So again, here's the purpose that we're talking about, right? And how long does this last? Well, we don't know, right? Because at the end of the day, we're going to let the researchers do what they need to do. And I will tell you, though, she's been with us for 6 months, and she's doing very well. And her family continues to report that she is stable and that she is engaged during the day, and they're doing the things that they need to do. So, sadly, this disease doesn't have an end. So, people will work through and to the function that they can, they can help to support. And we want to be a piece of that puzzle. Joy Glenner's famous quote all the time was, "We're sharing the caring," and that's what we do. We share the caring. So that is Susie's story. These are cooking classes. Susie's in this picture as well. And we actually doing cooking demonstration here. 2 of our program assistants there. And that's the library, so you can see some of the the puzzles that we do. Each storefront, of course, is that just that. It is a backdrop, and we will do all of the programming inside of the storefronts. But as I mentioned earlier, we're doing everything from certainly reminiscence therapy, but pet therapy, music therapy. We're doing things like art therapy, as you saw earlier. And I think what ends up really happening is that, you know, it breaks the day up into these kind of periods where participants can kind of manage kind of that stimulation. We don't want to overstimulate, we don't want to understimulate, so it's typically 2 or 3 storefronts in the morning, lunch, and then typically 2 or 3 storefronts in the afternoon. And we're certainly assessing and making sure, and I guess we have that clinical component as well, so we have our registered nurse available if there's any kind of clinical needs that need to be addressed. Some of the things that I always like to mention, you can kind of see them in the picture, and I don't like to gloss over them, but like the art on the wall is actually donated by Chuck Jones Gallery. Some of you might recognize Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones was the creator of Bugs Bunny. And so his grandson now runs the gallery. They wanted to be engaged in the program, so they donated a lot of the artwork that you see. And you can kind of look in the background. Like I said, I like to leave these pictures up for a little bit so you can appreciate some of the detail. There's a set of 1961 Collier's encyclopedias in there. There's National Geographics that go back to 1950. So again, these are all prompts. And we hosted an activity directors conference, and I always like to say it's like an activity director's dream is really what it is, because you want your activity directors to be engaged. And typically, sadly, in memory care communities, oftentimes, you know, the activities budget is very small. It's not really what it needs to be, and it's nobody's fault per se. It's much more of a residential model. But our space, of course, is 100% designed to promote that recreation and that engagement. And everything that you have is based on pre-programming and a diverse programming as well. We have individuals that are Spanish speaking. We have individuals that are Tagalog speaking or Filipino speaking. We have individuals that are Chinese speaking, Vietnamese speaking. So this model works wherever, because we can create the environment to be diversified. We can create the environment to be all-inclusive. So, we've had a lot of interesting questions, as you can imagine, over the years. Number one question is what happens in the next 10 years, things like that. So I'll answer that for you now. So typically, until this terrible disease is eradicated from the planet and we can rent Town Square out to be like a older adult fun zone or something like that. We are hosting an 18th birthday party in a couple weeks, so we do use the space for other things as opposed to just our day programming. But I think what ends up happening is that we update the storefronts over the years, just like you would see storefronts being updated in downtown areas, in metro areas. So I like to say my Town Square is probably going to need a Blockbuster and an arcade. But that's what happens. Spaces get updated. Buildings don't necessarily get torn down, places get updated, and that's what we would need to do. And the opera was very supportive of that and their commitment to the project. So some of our collateral that we've developed here, of course, so, as we've mentioned, it's really an immersive reminiscence therapy environment. And we have several different ways. I know it's a little small, but we have several different ways that people can visit. We're obviously a licensed adult day healthcare center, but we actually have individuals come in through Senior Helpers, which I like to always mention. So Senior Helpers is our national strategic partner. So Senior Helpers is a wonderful organization, and we've created a partnership with them where they will help us to franchise the locations throughout the country. So Peter Ross is the CEO of Senior Helpers, and we were able to create this, what we call a strategic alliance agreement, so that there's this franchising plan over the next several years. The first location, which will be a Senior Helpers corporate location in Baltimore, is already underway. There's one in development now in Louisville, Kentucky, and then there'll be some shortly in Chicagoland area, greater Chicago area. So, and they are able to access this. So 2 things about Senior Helpers, in addition to the great partnership with the franchising, is that one of the things is all of our direct care staff is Senior Helpers staff. So it's really a wonderful partnership because some of you might know Senior Helpers works very closely with Teepa Snow, and is wonderful, wonderful trainer, and uses the Senior Gems concept. So we have had great success with that partnership. And so David Wallace is our local Senior Helpers franchise owner, and so he provides all the direct care staff in our location. And as the concept expands, if somebody purchases a location in, let's say, Miami, they're going to use the Senior Helpers local franchise to provide the staffing. So that's a wonderful benefit of the partnership, because you come into the space already having the staff. We have people that come on their own as well through self-guided experience, and then of course we have some individual clients through Senior Helpers that come in as a non-clinical model, and that's actually $85 a day, so that's even less if they don't have any clinical needs. We have outings for residential communities and assisted living communities as well. So activity directors will come in and bring groups in. And then, of course, events. So, as I mentioned, we've had already several like Rotary type clubs or type local organizations, and I love that because it creates more awareness about what we do as an organization, and really just about Alzheimer's in general. Yesterday, before I flew out, I had a group of 5th graders come through, and their project with their teacher was to create their town square in the next 70 years. So you can see that. So if you pop on up, it's like, and you can see us either on Facebook or some of the other social media platforms. You'll see some of the pictures, and it's really, really special to see those things, because this is really about educating people and creating awareness, removing the stigmas. What I like to always wrap up by saying is, as I mentioned earlier, Town Square is a place of purpose, and we try to find that purpose, even though it can be elusive sometimes, and because the disease is very, very difficult, we work hard to find what's meaningful to people, right? And it doesn't work in every single case, but it works in a lot of cases. And if you think about these spaces, right, the movie theaters, the barbershop where we have a beautician come in, these are spaces that are often cut off to people in society. They're not going to movie theaters anymore. They're not going to libraries anymore. They're not going to restaurants any longer. So we have a space and an environment where, until the word dementia-friendly or the term dementia-friendly communities really becomes a reality in this country, and we have some challenges in this country, as we know, healthcare being one of the amazing as our country is, we struggle with healthcare mightily, and it's hard to figure out good options for people that they can still access services in the community, and dementia happens to be one of those types where people are really shut out of a lot of spaces that they would normally be able to access. And so Town Square provides a glimpse back into those spaces and hopefully some joy in an otherwise very, very tragic situation. This is my contact information, so I always like to put that up. We're going to keep doing, as I always like to say, we're going to keep fighting the good fight and bringing this awareness. I'm in awe of what you guys are doing here today and what Maria's done here, and all of these great partners that are here. And again, the work that you guys do as family caregivers, I know it comes from your heart. Just again, I'll end as I started saying that there are people out here that are fighting for you and trying to create resources. So if I can be any time of any assistance, that's my email. Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help. I'll take time for questions.
If your loved one is an introvert and didn't have a lot of times when they went out with other people, the accountant comes to mind. My mom was a bookkeeper. How do they acclimate into that? Because if I literally said to her, I'm going to go take you where other people are and drop you off, she would lose it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's not a cookie cutter type response to that, other than what I typically, and what my team and I have really focused on, is trying to figure out a way to engage the individual where they're not necessarily looking at it as a drop-off type situation. So my staff is really well trained to be able to bring people in. Typically the family caregiver will come in for a while, and then we'll run some distractions so that the caregiver can leave, right? So that's kind of our number one technique. But one of the things that we like to just say is that we need some help here. This is a big city. We need some help. We got some different things. So whether it's helping out in the pet shop, whether it's helping out with the books, we're going to find something hopefully that is going to connect with them and resonate with them. And if it doesn't right away, we're going to keep trying. And we've had some really challenging cases. We have one lady that she's amazing, but she really only wants to play poker. Like, that is her thing. Like, so we got to work hard to get her into some other programming, but inevitably she'll be in the pub playing poker. And I will tell you straight up, she cheats. She puts the cards up here. I mean, and some of my staff doesn't like playing with her because, you know, because she's kind of ruthless when she plays. But I love that story because, again, she was very reluctant. And don't you know, now she's coming like, I think 4 times a week. So she was up to 5 times a week at one point. But and some days we have to run distraction even now. So, you know, we know that with Alzheimer's, every day is different. We know that. So we're going to rely on the family caregivers to let us know, like, you know, what kind of a day is it? You know, is this a day where you need to come in and we need to, you know, and of course, most family caregivers are very comfortable with just saying, you know, I'm good. I've got a little bit of time, and then you know, because they oftentimes have to get to the things they need to do. But we will work on those techniques to get them engaged. You're right. Not yet.
So knowing that music memory is in a different part of the brain, so that's a wonderful thing. And I saw the jukebox in your video, which was wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Do you use music a lot? Because I would bet that would be just a really instrumental and significant portion of your treatment in Town Square.
Yeah, that's a great question. We use music, I think, probably the most, just because of the fact that we have entertainers come in, we have various performers come in, and we actually had the local high school come in and do a show choir performance. So we really work hard to integrate the community into our programming, and again, it's a win-win because it creates awareness about the organization and what we do, and it breaks that stigma down as well, but it also allows for these types of really special programs to come in. And because the way the movie theater is one of the larger storefronts, it has a stage built in, it has a 1930s piano inside of it, so we can set up for different types of entertainment right inside the theater. And people often ask me about the theater. We'll show clips of movies, like 10 to 15 minutes, and kind of engage in conversation, because as you guys know, not every activity is going to go exactly to plan, and that's okay. But we do a lot of, you know, improvising when we can, I guess, depending on how the reaction to the programming is. But I will say far and away music keeps the participants pretty highly engaged. Do we have time for a couple more?
That is a wonderful concept, and I'm wondering when we're breaking ground in Pinellas County.
Well, okay.
Did you
I
hear
did.
me?
She said, when are we breaking ground in Pinellas County? Well, so because of the partnership that we have with Senior Helpers, all the locations outside of San Diego County will be franchise locations, and what we love about that is we'll receive a percentage of the revenue to continue our work as a nonprofit. It's so difficult to bring a kind of a nonprofit to a national level, so we're really excited to have partners through the franchise model that can be investors with a heart, right, that can bring this to their communities. So I know that you have wonderful programs here already in the county, and so it really just depends on, you know, kind of the interest. So.
Quick question. How would my husband get a haircut there at the barber shop? He would love it.
Yeah, great question. We actually have a contract with a licensed cosmetologist that comes in. Right now she's coming twice a month, so she's got a full schedule when she comes in. Yep, you make an appointment at the front desk. Yeah, we do haircuts, we do manicures, we do shampoos and sets. I don't see any perms yet. And then we're actually contracting with a dentist to come in as well now too, because if you might know, barber shops used to double as dental offices back in the day, and so dentists would come in and use barber shops as dental offices as well. So we're going to provide some dental services there. So whatever services we can provide to the families, we try to do that. So I know my time is up, so I'm going to be here. My flight is not till tonight, so if there's any questions I can answer on the break or anything like that, I'm happy to. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me be here. Thank you.